In 2022, NASA released an image that quietly destroyed 30 years of cosmological modeling. Not one model, not a regional theory or a disputed hypothesis. Every major framework astronomers had built to explain how the universe creates galaxies, gone in a single exposure. The image was called the James Webb Space Telescope's first deep field. It showed galaxies that were too big, too bright, and too structured to exist at the age they existed at. The scientists who built the models that predicted what Webb would find were, to use the word one researcher actually used in print, panicking. Here is why that matters beyond academic embarrassment. Cosmology is not just a hobby for people who like big numbers. The models that Webb just shattered are the same models that underpin how we calculate the age of the universe, the distribution of dark matter, and the ultimate fate of everything that exists. When you break the foundation, you do not just rewrite a textbook chapter. You reopen questions that physics spent decades treating as settled, and the answers, or the absence of them, will define the next century of science. Right now, in July 2026, 3 separate international research teams are racing to publish competing explanations. The European Space Agency increased Webb's allocated observation time by 22% this fiscal year specifically to gather more data on these anomalous early galaxies. The James Webb Telescope costs roughly $10 billion to build and launch. The decision to pivot its entire observing schedule around a cosmological crisis is not made lightly. 2 of the competing explanations require adding entirely new physics that does not currently exist in any verified form. The third suggests our measurement of time itself, the cosmic clock we use to date everything, is miscalibrated. Every one of those outcomes is enormous. To understand what Webb found, you need a quick picture of what scientists expected. After the Big Bang, roughly 13.8 billion years ago, the universe was a hot, dense fog. For about 380,000 years, light could not even travel freely. Matter was too compressed. Then things cooled. Hydrogen formed. Gravity slowly pulled gas clouds together. The first stars lit up somewhere around 200 to 400 million years after the Big Bang. Galaxies, the theory said, grew slowly, like cities, starting as small settlements that merge over millions of years into sprawling metropolises. That process takes time. Lots of it. Small, chaotic, dim galaxies early on. Large, structured, luminous ones much later. This framework is called Lambda-CDM, shorthand for lambda cold dark matter, and it was the most tested model in modern physics. Tested against the Hubble Space Telescope, against ground observatories, against microwave background data collected over decades. It was not a guess. It was the closest thing cosmology had to established law. Webb changed that on its first real look. The telescope began science operations in mid-2022 and within weeks returned images of galaxies at redshift 10 and beyond, meaning we are seeing them as they existed less than 500 million years after the Big Bang. That is early, uncomfortably early. But the problem was not just their age. It was their size. Astrophysicist Evo Lab at Swinburne University led one of the first major analyses and found galaxies in the Webb data with stellar masses equivalent to our own Milky Way, or larger, already fully formed at that epoch. The Milky Way took over 10 billion years to accumulate its mass. These objects did it in under 500 million. To put that in human terms, it would be like finding a fully grown adult in a hospital nursery 2 days after birth. The Lambda-CDM model does not just struggle to explain this. It categorically predicts it cannot happen. The second revelation is stranger still, and it has to do with structure. Early galaxies, according to every pre-Webb model, should look messy. Irregular blobs of gas and star formation, chaotic and asymmetrical, because the organizing processes, galactic mergers, angular momentum settling, disk formation, take billions of years to produce order. What Webb found were galaxies at redshift 6, 7, 8 with clear spiral structures. Actual spiral arms. The kind of elegant, organized geometry we associate with mature galaxies like Andromeda. One galaxy cataloged in early 2023, nicknamed the Sparkler Galaxy, showed globular clusters, gravitationally bound collections of hundreds of thousands of stars that were older than the galaxy around them should have been able to produce. A 2023 study in Nature Astronomy found that at least 13% of the galaxies Webb observed in deep field imaging were more massive than any Lambda-CDM simulation allowed at that distance. 13% is not a statistical outlier. 13% is a systematic failure of the model. The implication is not that a few galaxies are weird. The implication is that something about how galaxies form is fundamentally wrong in our current understanding. The mechanism Webb uses to detect these ancient objects is worth understanding because it explains why no telescope before it could see this crisis coming. Webb operates primarily in infrared light, wavelengths invisible to human eyes and mostly blocked by Earth's atmosphere. It must operate in space, and it must be cold, kept at -233 degrees Celsius, just 40 degrees above absolute zero, because infrared detectors are blinded by their own heat. Here is the key physics. As the universe expands, light stretches. A galaxy 13 billion light-years away is moving away from us so fast that its ultraviolet and visible light gets stretched all the way into the infrared by the time it reaches us. This is called cosmological redshift. Hubble could see some of this, but its infrared detectors were limited. Webb's primary mirror is 6.5 meters across, almost 3 times the diameter of Hubble's, and it has infrared sensitivity that is roughly 100 times greater. Think of it as the difference between reading a book in candlelight versus stadium floodlights. Hubble was seeing what was there. Webb is seeing what was always there and hidden, and what it is revealing does not match the blueprints we drew up for the early universe. The complications are real and worth naming. The first is the measurement problem. Redshift estimates, the tool used to assign distance and age to these galaxies, can be calculated quickly from imaging, but confirming them requires spectroscopy, splitting the galaxy's light into a spectrum and reading the chemistry. Some of the most extreme Webb candidates have not yet been spectroscopically confirmed. If some of those redshift estimates are wrong, the crisis shrinks. It does not disappear, but it shrinks. The second complication is theoretical inflation, not the economic kind, but a competing model that suggests the early universe went through a period of exponentially faster expansion than standard Lambda-CDM assumes. Adjusting inflation parameters can produce more massive early galaxies on paper, but the adjustments required to match Webb's observations push inflation theory into regions that other cosmological data cannot support. You cannot fix one problem without breaking 3 others. That is where the field stands today, and it is genuinely uncomfortable for people who have built careers on models that are now in question. For you, this matters more concretely than it might seem. Every GPS satellite you use depends on corrections derived from general relativity, a theory that connects directly to our cosmological models. Recalibrating deep constants, including the Hubble constant, which Webb's findings put further pressure on, has eventual downstream effects on precision timing systems that underpin financial transactions, telecommunications, and navigation. More immediately, the data pipeline Webb is generating is becoming a primary training source for machine learning models being used by observatories worldwide to classify and analyze astronomical objects. The skills needed to work with that data, spectral analysis, high-dimensional imaging, cosmological simulation, are among the fastest growing in computational science. If you are anywhere near astrophysics, data science, or even scientific software engineering, the next decade of Webb observations is where foundational work will happen. 40 years from now,